Ladies and gentlemen, coming up next is our first panel discussion. At this panel, we have with us 4 seasoned business leaders of different business backgrounds who are no stranger to the industry. Today, innovation is rapidly expanding across the world. Our panel will discuss about bridging East and West innovation capabilities and market demands to innovate the X factor in the industry. Our first guest panelist is one of the founding members of Privasia Group and was appointed the Group Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Privasia Group in May 2009. Puvanesan Subenthiran is also a member of the Young Presidents Organization and the president of the Industry Entrepreneurs in the Malaysian chapter. Our second guest panelist has 25 years of financial services experience covering investment banking, wholesale, Islamic and digital banking. Maimunah is currently Managing Director of Wholesale Banking for AmBank Group. Prior to her current appointment, she was the Managing Director and CEO of Hong Leong Islamic Bank and COO of Digital Innovation and Transaction Banking at the Hong Leong Banking Group. Our third guest panelist has 16 years of experience with MIDA. Currently, Norhizam Ibrahim is the Director and Advanced Technology and Research and Development Division. His role in MIDA focuses on identifying trends, new and emerging technologies such as smart manufacturing or Industry 4.0, as well as new businesses suitable for Malaysia's industry and business ecosystem. Lastly, but not least, our panel moderator, Professor Loredana Padurean, is the Associate Dean and Faculty Director for Action Learning at Asia School of Business, which is a collaboration between MIT Sloan School of Management and Bank Negara Malaysia, the Central Bank of Malaysia. She is also an International Faculty Fellow at MIT. She is a global keynote speaker, and her in-demand "Nail It, Scale It, Sail It" is a popular TEDx talk. This is definitely a power-packed panel. Are you guys as excited as I am? If you are, please let us know down in the comment section below or in the chat box. Before I hand over to Prof. Loredana, just a gentle reminder that if you have any questions for our panel, please type it in the chat box or in the comment section if you're on Facebook or YouTube, and we will address it at the end of the panel. All right, so the panel is currently getting ready, and we'll be back to you in a short while, so please stay tuned.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Star. It is such a pleasure to be here with you today. First, before we get started, I just want to be sure that we thank everybody for being here. Special thanks to The Star for hosting this amazing event. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the outstanding speakers that we have today for this panel. And I have to say, it's such a joy to be physically in person, right? This is I think the first time I'm not behind the screen. I mean, we're behind this screen, but we are in person. We could almost touch each other, which we're not going to do because it's not appropriate in the MCO rules. But my name is Professor Loredana. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. Like the announcer said, I'm with Asia School of Business, which is an MIT Sloan Bank Negara collaboration. And I'm very proud to say today we're going to talk about disruptive innovation and disruptive innovation across borders. Can I brag a little bit before we get started and to let you know that the Asia School of Business MBA program that is here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, has received twice nominations for being the most innovative MBA program in the world. So as a local, in case you can't tell, I am Malaysian by now. I'm from Bukit Tungku. I'm very, very proud to say that we have the most innovative MBA program in the world today. So with me today, we have these amazing speakers. Each of them are going to tell you a little bit more about themselves. They have already been introduced by our moderator today of The Star. But let me just say it's my pleasure to have Dr. Raja for AmBank, right? We have Mr. Hizam from MIDA, and we have Mr. Puva from Privasia. I'm trying to learn this name, so give me a little bit of a break. Without further ado, today we are talking about transformation, digital disruption, innovation, disruption across borders. So I want to start with a quote. One of my favorite disruptors, which is Steve Jobs, said something which is really interesting, and allow me to read it so I don't misquote him. Steve Jobs said, "I have a great respect for incremental improvement. And I've done that sort of thing in my life. But I've always been more attracted to revolutionary changes. I don't know why. Because they are harder, they require much more stress emotionally, and usually when you go through a period where everybody tells you they're not going to work and you're going to completely fail." So today we're not just being disrupted by the digital world, but we're being disrupted as we speak by the realities of COVID. And like Steve Jobs said, disruption is hard. It's going to take a major emotional toll on you. And speaking of very hard things, I'm going to start with a very brave person that I've met today. We spent about 15 minutes together, and that made me realize that she's probably one of the bravest bankers which I've met in my life. I don't know if that's a contradiction in terms, if you can be brave and a banker. But Dr. Raja, speaking of that, allow me to start with you and say that banks have a little bit of a bad rap for not being very innovative. Is that correct? And also for being a little bit lagging behind fintechs. Would you care to start with commenting on that and tell us a little bit about what was your experience as one of the leaders of AmBank going through the past few months, and what's your take on digital transformation and disruptive innovation in general?
Thanks for that, Prof. And I'd like to congratulate you on the award at the school. That's great. You're not wrong. I must say that banks in general and globally tend to initially look at fintechs as just small little players on the side, nothing for us to worry about, and therefore the banks felt that their God-given right essentially to run the financial industry and didn't move very far ahead. The challenge that what happened is in the last few years is that the banks then came to realize that the small little fintechs were not after the big banking business. They were just interested in the smaller, profitable side of the businesses. And so they were chipping away the smaller, non-balance sheet heavy kind of business. And then banks started to think, okay, maybe I should, also do something about it. So there is a lot of them actually say, okay, we got to do something. We got to innovate too. But the reality is, most of the banks aren't able to move very far, and it's not because of want of technology at all. It is largely the mindset. So the challenge that I see within the industry is the ability to unlearn and relearn and do something completely different. Because banks generally are very clunky, our infrastructure is clunky, and whereas the fintechs are now using, I think Puva will be able to share, a nimble kind, more agile kind of infrastructure, and we've not been able to move into that direction. And so for me, I mean, the journey has started close to a decade now, and I remember, in the early days when I motioned it in the previous bank I was working at, the challenge I had was really getting everybody on board. So I used to have this organization chart that I would share with people. I would call them the chief skeptic officers and the chief resistant officers. Really, that's really what it is, because we have money, and we're certainly not wanting with technology. So it's very much in the mindset.
Thank you for that. As we were speaking, I was thinking, what type of chief officer am I? I don't think I'm a skeptical. I think I'm a disruptor. But I have to say, for the past, actually more than 2 years, I had a lot of conversations with very large or very small companies across Malaysia and beyond. And everybody talks about digital transformation and disruptive innovation, and they all want physical tools. They think that transformation is something that you buy from companies like yours, Puva, right? But what I've been saying for over 2 years now, it starts with the people. It starts with the mindset, and it starts with somebody who's, what's your chief officer status? Are you the chief bold officer? Raja, something like that. So you have to go through a people transformation before you go into physical transformations. So Puva, you're in the field of technology and communication. Your company operates in a space that a lot of people said was very well paced for the disruption that COVID brought. Was COVID a godsend gift to your industry? What was your experience of going through, and what's your take on disruptive innovation?
Thank you, Professor. So for an industry like ours, I think traditionally we took our time as well. We invested a lot in heavy infrastructure, and we always thought of other players as competitors. When we build a solution, it's very focused for one buyer, and we didn't care about the ecosystem around them. I think now it's moving to us building platforms and solutions where we take into consideration the needs of all the stakeholders for a customer. So because we're building ecosystems, the way that we look at our competitors is it's moved away from competition because we need to move fast, to collaboration. I think a lot of people in our industry realize that we need to work with the people around us because we can't be experts at everything. And we got to deliver a service fast, cheap and easy to adapt for people. So I think that's why in the fintech space, I think they worked that way before. That's why a lot of them chipped in, and there's a lot of mergers and collaborations. So our industry is moving away from competition, more to collaboration.
That's so interesting. In the break before we got started, we were just chatting, and Raja, you mentioned how the space of collaboration. I know we didn't talk about this question, but it's so telling on what we just talked before. That in the banking world, we are so used to see other banks as competitors. What's your take on this? You were talking about how we need to move from this to...
Yeah, because banks traditionally have always been, these are my customers, this is my proprietary infrastructure, everything is mine, I build myself because I have lots of money. But the whole idea of the fintech today is exactly like what Puva said, is the platform. Everybody must collaborate. So when I talk about mindset, the things that us the financial industry must embrace is, within the mindset is the mindset of collaboration. You have to, because you cannot be good at everything. And then the most important thing is you no longer own the customer. The customer is no longer going to say, I'm going to bank with you till the day I die. Right? Because there's no real brand loyalty. Everything is about whoever that gives you the best convenience and stuff. So if that guy does something better than I do, we should allow them to come into the platform, and together we will be able to give 10 things to our customers. Now, maybe if you bank with a particular bank, that bank can give you 3 services. But if you use the platform, you might be able to do 10 things. You might be able to even hail a ride, order your food on a banking app.
Wouldn't that be great?
That would be great, yeah.
I have 7 apps on my phone to do very similar transactions. I have to say, I would rather not do that. Why do I have to? I'm not an AmBank client, by the way, so this is not a pitch. But what I'm saying is, I would rather have the AmBank app that allows me to go, shopping on Shopify, order my food, get my Grab, right? I think what we're seeing today from the private sector is we're seeing a lot of disruptive innovation. But I think both of you talked about the need of having collaborative platforms, right, that allow you as a private player to, in a way, shop in the same pond, right, or fly from the same pond. So let's talk about the government right now. We have one government expert here. Don't worry, you are safe. This is a safe place, even though we are from a private perspective here. When we hear all these comments about disruptive innovation, about transformation, about mindset, your job at MIDA is very hard because you have to create, if you want, the narrative that attracts foreign investment in the country, but at the same time you have to look at the local platform, the local offerings, and say this is what we have versus this is what we should have. So when you look at what foreign investment is interested in, what do you think Malaysia, or what do you think that the private sector and the public sector in Malaysia should focus towards? What's the next thing?
Okay, thanks, Loredana. Thanks, Prof. So I'd like to rectify a few things. Here in MIDA, we promote not only foreign direct investment, we also promote domestic direct investment.
Correct. I'm sorry about that.
We also ensure that regional development is being taken care of so that wealth equality is being shared among all the regions. So the industry transformation journey started in 60s, 70s with the 8 samurais. We started to focus on import substitution, labor intensive, then we moved to heavy industry, and then we go into high-tech industry promotion. Next will be on focusing on service sector, and here we are at the phase of 4IR and industry 4.0 adoption. So there's a lot of exciting things going on, where you see last time we used to do promotion of investment, we looked at factors like whether this kind of products or activities are being promoted in our promoted list or not. But comes 4IR or Industry 4.0, things that is no longer sexy in the past becomes relevant right now. You have a situation where, for example, like Adidas, they close shop in China and they open back in Germany. Why? Because they can afford not to look into labor intensity and leverage on technology. So that is happening right now. So what I'm trying to say is right now, the industry, the type of project that we can afford to say, probably you can go to the more labor-intensive countries. But now, because of the avenue where we can leverage on technology adoption, those projects are becoming, probably that is the thing that we also look at. So those that are not so being under our priority sector become could do. So with all these elements, for example, like you have all the white goods, refrigerators, all the kitchen, those are no longer a thing from Malaysia in the past. But now, with all the advent of all the elements of IoT, technology, big data, analytics, it becomes a smart device. And together with it, of course, you want the project initiative to have the elements, smart manufacturing. So that becomes a sustainable thing for us now. So I'm trying to say, whatever things come into the picture, it becomes an opportunity for us. So we could look at areas that we don't want, but we can also be looking at, we have to go deep dive and look at what are the things that we could look at, what the country can give more values. And for the past, since last 2 years, the government has announced the Industry 4.0 policy to encourage more industrial players to adopt Industry 4.0. So what is being mentioned by all of you, there are 3 elements that we could look at. We look at technology; those are very close to us. Where when we attract the kind of project that we want to be in Malaysia, whether from FDI or DI, the technology element is important. We could also look at the processes element, where existing industry, how we can ramp them up to be relevant and still be in existence. But the only thing that we have to focus right now is the people factor. That's where you talk about the change of mindset, because now we have the level of maturity is at different level. For multinational, of course, we don't have to teach them; they already know because of their exposure. But for our SMEs, that is where a lot of work needs to be done.
One of my favorite expressions is, and I think everybody who knows me or they've been through ASB heard me say this 100 times, is the job is easy, the people are not. So the truth is that no matter how much you want to talk about disruptive innovation, technology transformation, until the people are there, you're not going to be able to do it. All the chief skeptical officers that you mentioned, every single one of us has one of this person in the company, or we are this person in the company. We also have to realize that, right? Puva, you're a technology expert. How do you feel when we talk about people stuff? Do you see that in your field?
So, I think the people stuff is very close to our heart, right? We have to accept that even though I live and breathe technology is just a tool. It's a means to get you to where you are. So, for us, when we invest in anything that we do, it's, we'll tell people that we're investing in blockchain, IR 4.0, different technologies. But the truth is we try to invest in transparency, speed of getting data, the authenticity of data, and then the tools to analyze and for the users to take a call of action. Everything that we invest in actually has the user and people at heart. So, you spoke about Steve Jobs. And, he's also one of my favorite, disruptors, innovator. Anything that he built had the user at heart. And, the people stuff is very, very important to us.
Thank you so much. Speaking of disruptors, I think, like I said, I've known Raja for 15 minutes now, and I think of her as a disruptor. So I'm going to come to you with a people question. And allow me to quote somebody else again. It's not necessarily somebody I admire very much, but I think this quote is interesting. So Jeff Bezos from Amazon, and the reason why I don't admire him very much is I'm not sure he's very good with people, but he's very good with the other stuff. He said, being customer focused allows you to be more pioneering. And one of the things that I teach a lot in my strategy courses is that the closer you are to the customer in the value chain, the more potential for disruption you have, because you're very close to listening to the voice of the customer. So speaking of AmBank, speaking of SMEs, speaking of the value of people, Raja, how much is your job focused on listening to customers versus, in a way, doing what Steve Jobs did, which is anticipating what the customers want? Because I don't think Steve Jobs listened that much to the customer as much as he observed the customers very carefully.
Well, I have to take one step back here with regards to how banks in general have always been operating. We've always been delivering products. So what we do is we create products and we sell it to you. And so now my mantra to the team is we're not selling products anymore. We have to sell experiences. And that is a real big change for the product developer, because guess what? We used to build them in a tiny shack and we don't talk to anybody. So the first time I set up a customer experience lab was a few years ago. And we had already a product in hand. But after we went through this lab with 25, potential target customers, the product changed by 50% in design, which shows that we actually didn't know what they needed. What is it that they require and what is it that makes sense to them? So what Puva said is very, very, it's something that I have to keep saying all the time. And, I don't have a great quote, but my quote to my guys is, if you cannot think out of the box, you have to burn your box down or get somebody, hire from somebody outside your box. So that was also something that we did. We started hiring non-bankers. We started hiring people from different parts of the industry, because banking is not just about financial services. You don't wake up in the morning and say, great, today I'm going to get some banking done. Is that what you think? No, right? Hey, today I'm going to buy myself a nice pair of shoes. So we're just supposed to be the enabler to your experience of buying that shoes. So the whole UI, UX thing, as much as banks always say, we listen to you, building it for you, truly the concept of CX, or then the whole UI UX, is not embedded in the DNA. Though I must say today I'm very encouraged to say the industry as a whole globally, you'll see some big banks who have actually done a pretty good job now to be able to think out of the box, burn the old box down, and bring people from outside. So we've actually got people who are from the FMCG side, people selling cosmetics and stuff like that, whom banks would not have hired, ordinarily. So
we already have some questions from the audience, so I'm on a question thread here. Feel free to text us or send us questions. I have a question for all three of you before I ask this question, which is, I hear a lot about how we need to transform our mindsets, how we need to forget about boxes. I have to say, I feel like I've heard this for the past 15 years of my life, and there's still a lot of boxes around us. It's easier to think outside of box if you never believed there was a box to start with. Since I'm an educator and my job is to think forward and think about what are the skills that I need to infuse my students to be ready for this disruption, allow me to start with Puva, and I'll actually ask each and every one of you to think about, tell me as an educator, tell us as educators, what skills are you looking for? And what type of, if you want, formal or informal education somebody needs today to be a true disruptor in the bank. And I'm so inspired by what you just said, Raja, that we don't have to think that we need to hire bankers. But what are these type of people that we need for disruptive innovation?
So, like for an industry like mine, training, everybody takes it for granted because you usually train for a technical skill. But as Raja just now mentioned, customer experience is very important. As we try and build solutions for our customers, for example, if you build an online solution, we want the customer to get where they are with 3 clicks. Nobody needs to train them to do it. So we find the talent that is a bit tough for us to go and look out for are people who are a bit more creative and good at communication and a bit more entrepreneurial about how they do it. So,
isn't that amazing that a technology expert wants creative, out-of-the-box thinking people? Again, the job is easy. The people are not, right? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's so good.
Yeah, so communication is very important for us. Because of the field that we're in, we can't plan when you communicate to your customer. So you need our services and products to be able to speak and win to the customer over. So we're looking for those kind of skill sets.
I recently experienced the product, and it came with a manual this thick. And I thought, do I really need to read 300 pages to understand how my oven works? So I think this product design intuition that you also mentioned, Raja, has to be done by people who have to think like the users, right? What's your take on what's the future skill that we need, the present skill that we need actually, because the future is now.
I also have to put, and being enterprising or having a very entrepreneurial approach is very key, because then you would own it as opposed to being part of like a big organization like ours, right? A bank. The other thing is I would like, and I actually encourage my daughter who's doing computer science to actually minor in behavioral psychology, because then you will understand your user, your target audience. So right now, if you come as a cookie cutter kind of guy, you're either, I don't know, a lawyer or an accountant or stuff like that, and you're trying to sell something and you don't understand your target audience. You know why Steve Jobs was very successful? Honestly, it was about behavioral psychology. That was what he was able to read. And if we can, and you look at all these amazing brands have re-engineered themselves. I take Burberry because, you know, that's a very old brand. It was something that my parents used to use, and I wouldn't be seen wearing Burberry back when I was 20 years old. But my kids today think it's so funky. Why? Because they were able to re-engineer and think about the next generation. Just because what works in mine may not work in the next few guys. And for a business to work, we have to understand that our inventory actually come from different generation, right? So the Gen Z and the, you know, like my children have never walked into a bank branch at all in their lives. You know, they actually open an account, but they don't live in this country, but they open an account entirely online. And the eldest one attempted to walk into a high street branch and was given a really hard time. And she said, you know what? I can do this with this digital bank. And the point is, that high street branch is either, I think, a 200-year-old bank. You're going to lose all these 20-year-olds, right? So how are you going to still be here 20 years from now when this girl has decided you're not the bank for her? So which is why one of the skills that I like to see is those who are able to, you know, the psychology part of it has never been in, at least when I went back to university, we didn't have that bit. But I'm seeing it now in courses. They're offering minor in behavioral psychology or consumer psychology, as they call it. So if you could add that on, Prav, would be great. I'll send my guys to you.
Got it. Let me just send a text to our curriculum team. I want to say two things. So I also teach at MIT. I teach in Malaysia, and I teach two things. I teach entrepreneurship, and I teach what we're going to call smart skills. I'll tell you that in a little bit. When I teach at MIT, especially in the executive education space, so for people like us, when I teach entrepreneurship, I have a lot of people from very large companies who are interested in entrepreneurship because they realize, just like you mentioned, that entrepreneurship is not a skill that you need if you're a startup founder or if you're an SME founder. That you need in very large organizations like yours, you need to think like an entrepreneur. Now, with all due respect to my country, which is Malaysia, I also pay taxes in this country, so I feel entitled to say a little bit about it. When I try to sell entrepreneurship to executive education here, people look at me and said, I'm not an entrepreneur. Why do I need to take entrepreneurship courses? And I'm like, well, because if you want to work for AmBank, for somebody as amazing as you, she's going to look for entrepreneurial skills. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to think like one. You have to be a human who wants to succeed in life to think like one. And then the second thing that I teach, and again, this is not a soft sale, it's actually a direct sale. Because I think if you know, one of my favorite expressions is, if you think education is expensive, you should try ignorance. So again, I think selling education is common sense. But one of the other things that I teach is a toolkit that I call the Smart Toolkit. So all my life, I've heard about soft and hard skills. But you think about it, the word soft and hard are right, in a way, the opposite. So do you know when this concept was invented? It was invented in 1972 by a doctor in the US Army who noticed that different military staff has different skills. Some of them are very good at the hard stuff, which is, I guess, shooting people. And others were very good at communication, getting people motivated, you know, dealing with the soft stuff, which is people stuff. Now, in my experience, when I talk to people like you, and I ask, how much of your time do you spend in your job dealing with the soft stuff, with the people stuff? The higher you go in your career, the more time you spend. I'm sure that you spend over 80% of your job dealing with people stuff, right? Which requires soft skills. But what exactly is soft about managing people, dealing with your board, managing domestic and international investment? There's nothing soft about it. So we call it smart skills. And the truth is that the opposite of soft is hard, which means that if you don't have soft skills, by default you have hard skills, but that's not true. But what's the opposite of smart? Okay, all the laughs know it, right? So if you don't have them, you're dumb. Let me just tell you that. I work with a lot of people, I can tell you that. But also I have a problem with hard skills. Hard skills mean that it's something very hard. And by the way, your entire industry traditionally was hiring for hard skills, right? We look for engineers, we look for tech people, and now it turns out you also want people who are technical but also good with people. By the way, if you find one, I would like to marry that person because I think it's like impossible to find. So now we call those skills sharp skills because again, the truth is, if I learn a hard skills 20 years ago, it doesn't mean it's still available today or it's still relevant today. Somebody who learned a software language or whatever 5 years ago, it's completely obsolete today. So we call this sharp skills because the opposite of hard is soft, but the opposite of sharp is dull. Right, so let me just ask you, would you rather be dull and dumb or smart and sharp? Which again, can be combined. So when you talk about these things, this is what we are trying to teach at ASB. We're trying to teach smart skills and sharp skills, which are not in competition, which are not against each other. So speaking from your perspective, and looking at the type of skills that you would like to see in the ecosystem of Malaysia, what are you looking for? What would you like to see more? What do you think Malaysia should do more?
So in our line of doing work, we deal a lot with our ecosystem enablers. And when we talk about disruptive innovation, technology adoption, we see a lot of areas for improvement, be it from the multinational being the anchor companies or the supply chain vendor companies, or be it coming from even the stakeholders from the government. And we also take note that supply of talent is also important. Of course, there's no hard way or one solution that fits all. In our policy that the government launched, we take note that there is a need to ensure adequate supply of future talent as well as equipping the current talent with industry-ready skill. So the things that we discuss, probably what to have entrepreneurial skill, soft skill, those are pretty much relevant because right now we are talking about technology adoption, digitalization, and those are dealing with agile skill. And we need all this because the speed of delivering all the service is important. So I pretty much look at problem solving skill, soft skill.
Not soft, smart.
Smart skill, sorry. And of course we have the government has come up with a structured mechanism to address that, be it coming from the university, also working together with our ecosystem player, the training providers, to address the industry requirements. So, because if we wait until everything is ready, we cannot even move. And digital transformation or disruptive technology is not about it. So, if you don't start right now, you will not move it. You will not move.
I think somebody who thought in similar ways were the dinosaurs back in the days, right? When they sort of look and say, yeah, nothing is going to happen, we're big. How many dinosaurs have you seen roaming around lately? That's a telling story. So we have a bunch of questions. Thank you, everybody, for asking so many questions. Let me try to see. I'll go to you with the first question. Are Malaysian organizations skeptical about Malaysian tech solutions? They rather get solutions from IBM, Microsoft, SAP to play it safe. What can be done to change the mindset? Puva, let me start with you.
Okay, I don't think this is a Malaysian problem. Everybody looks for big brands. Now, the thing is, just like the banking example that we spoke about just now, everyone's comfortable with the giant, right? Because you think they'll never fail. But there's a lot of people who come up with nimble solutions around it, and if you ignore them, it's to your own peril. I know the Minister of Science has been talking a lot about going with Malaysian tech companies first. I don't think it's so much a rah-rah thing. There are a lot of good solutions that meet current business needs. And if we ignore them just because we're looking for a brand, I think it's to our peril. So it's not a Malaysian problem.
So we have a question, and I'm actually going to ask Raja this. How effective do you think new technology transformation enable microfinancing activities to support small-scale business? So we were talking before about how you would like to help more SMEs, how a lot of the things that happened actually during MCO with SMEs forced a lot of this transformative digital transformation, if you want. Would you want to take this question? So how effective would this new technology help small-scale businesses?
Actually, for us to really fuel micro SMEs in this country, digital technology is imperative. It's crucial because otherwise, if you are a micro SME, say you run a food truck, the example I gave you before, and you want to borrow money, and banks would typically ask you two things: show me your financial accounts, or can you put collateral on the table? How is this guy ever going to be able to do that? But on the other hand, for a bank, how can I then assess your credit worthiness? So if with the use of digital technology, largely using data, and we could use different kind of data like transactional data, behavioral data, like if you're a food truck guy and I can capture all your customers' transaction data on, say, a POS system, and you make sure you go pay your chicken supplier or whoever it is through some kind of a mobile cash management solution, if we can capture that, including, say, how prompt you are in paying your utility bills, how prompt you are in paying your telephone bills, using different kind of data and pulling that together and to score you, that is really, I think, what this country needs. And I think everybody in this country is working bits and pieces of that, because if you look at SMEs, I don't know, we're like what 70% of our GDP is SMEs, and what I do know is that micro SMEs can only get funding from the banks. About 20% only of them can actually access funding, and it's not because we don't want to lend, we don't know how to score you. So this is where you talk about the advent of digital technology.
We have an interesting question here from Arifin. And actually brings me back to something that we talked yesterday about some of the positive case studies that we had maybe during the MCO about how technology can transform. Let me read exactly the question, and I'll ask our colleague from MIDA to react. Robots were initially designed to do 3D, which is dangerous, dirty, and dreary. Now they can do more personalized jobs such as assistance to take care of elderly, do surgery. Will robots take over humanity one day? I don't know, but if the job is easy, the people are not. Maybe robots will be easier. But yesterday we actually talked about some of the interesting things that you saw happening during MCO from this technology perspective. Would you like to react to this question and tell us some of the examples?
Okay. As much as I am a hardcore fan of Star Wars, Matrix, I don't believe this will happen soon. Robots will facilitate. No, we have to work in tandem with humans. Robots will take some of the hard work, but it has to be done in our own way. It's up to us. How do you want to find robots to complement our work? So even if robots does take away the 3D kind of work, it doesn't mean that it's not gone the job opportunities for our people. What we need to do is also to upskill and reskill our people. And in relation to what you mentioned just now, I've seen a lot of opportunities during MCO, during the initial phase, where we see a lot of difficulties and a lot of struggling situation from our frontliners in hospitals. And this is where we see, Malaysian come out together. It used to be Malaysian when we gang up together, particularly when Malaysia went to the final for football, or Lin Chow Wei go to final for badminton. But during COVID, we all stand united, and we see a lot of able and good people with good technology background came out with their own solution to facilitate or make ease of our frontliners. We've seen good example of researchers from universities building up their own robot version to facilitate our frontliners in hospital, in quarantine centers. All these are actually put in place and put in practice and in real situations. So those are that replacing human work? No, it has to work in tandem and complement the areas that we are not able to maximize or optimize our work. So good stuff happening. We are not lacking in terms of people. We have good talent and our industry already. It's just that COVID is putting a situation to accelerate and put a certain recognition to our capabilities.
I was very, very inspired by some of the global positive stories that came out after, during MCO and after MCO. And the truth is that, like you mentioned so well, in a way, this global crisis accelerated a lot of the disruptive innovations. Puva, we were talking in the break that you've been dealing with digital transformation for about 10 years, right? And in the past 3 months now, everybody wants to be digitally transformed. You want to tell us a little bit more about that? And then, Raja, we have a question for you after that. Do we have any success stories of how to convert offline sales to online?
Yeah, so a lot of people talk about different tech, especially during the start of this crisis, pandemic, right? And when everyone had to start working from home. A lot of the tech was available for many, many years, right? What happened is people just became more efficient. And part of that efficiency is knowing exactly what they wanted, going out and getting it and using it to their advantage. So I thought people became better. It's not that tech became better.
And in a way, we became lower maintenance, right? A lot of the things that we felt like we needed to do before COVID, now we realize maybe we didn't need to do a lot of that. So, Raja, let me go to you. Do we have any success stories of how to convert offline sales to online? This is from Setyawan.
Well, I don't profess to be a social media guru, but what we have seen, our customers particularly, is that we've seen the rise of a new group of entrepreneurs who are able to actually start selling their stuff, largely because they have online stores. So that is clearly I think the biggest success stories. We have a number of really small micro SMEs sprouting out, just using the Instagram account. They don't even sell through the bigger e-commerce platforms like Lazada. They're really on their own. And we've met some of them who actually started out with, selling, maybe a tudung or kueh, at a pop-up store. But then now, because there's social media and all that, they're actually able to then sell to all around the country. So there's just so many to speak of. So all you have to do is just have a look. I don't have the data, but I remember MDEC was sharing with me, the number of pure online now, just selling small stuff through their social media accounts. So if you want to sell stuff today, unlike those days, you need a shop. You can just go and open an IG and sell stuff.
I used to. I'm vegan. I only eat vegetarian stuff. And before COVID, before the MCO, to be honest, I didn't know that we have farms in Cameroon that can deliver at home. Call that my ignorance, but I really didn't know. So when MCO started, my biggest panic was, so everybody during the first 2 weeks of MCO was buying beans and rice, which is, as a vegan, that's my bread and butter, if you want. All of a sudden, everybody realized that veggies are going to get us through this. And then I started getting on Instagram this small ad saying, buy direct from Cameroon, buy this. I have to tell you now that, in a way, MCO, the traditional MCO is over. I still buy my stuff from my farmer in Cameroon. I have an amazing relationship with him. We've never met in person. We talk daily about, are the tomatoes plump? Yes. Wait until you see the corn. So all of a sudden, my behavior changed, even post-COVID, because I realized that I can literally do from farm to table with one click. Isn't that amazing? So we actually have a really interesting question from Feroz on agri-tech. And you can take this question if you want, but I actually think it's a really good question for all of us. COVID taught us that we need to be self-sustainable. Ain't that true? So let's look at agriculture. Should Malaysia invest more in agri-tech and try to be more self-sustainable?
So, COVID teaches about the important needs of securing our food security. So we have situation where is our neighboring countries wanting to sell rice to us. So here in this today's topic, we talk about disruptive innovation, and this binds well with our new sector here. It's good that Malaysia has launched our industry forward policy meant to look into manufacturing related service sector. So along with that policy, we can have all the learning journey, all the good success story, what need to be done, and we're going to soon launch the fourth IR framework, blueprint framework. And in this relation, you look at disruptive technology. If in the future, if now is happening, if ride sharing is going to be the main thing, what happened to the situation where we have a lot of car parks area, a lot of buildings with car parks. So how does this transform into opportunity? With technology, I believe this can be done. I have seen pilot projects being done in relation to agri-tech, a combination of agriculture, hydroponics, IoT, connectivity, all this to ensure that our food security is being addressed for us in this country. So together with this, in agri-tech, we can also ensure that the people factor, the workers, sometimes we talk about agriculture is something that is not sexy for our younger generation. But with the agri-tech, agriculture can actually be done at outskirts of urban cities or at buildings, at car parks, and this binds well with all the gig generation, right?
Anybody else? I see a lot of, you don't see it, but I see a lot of nodding and very enthusiastic support from the rest of the panelists. Any comments before we wrap it up? Puva, let me start with you.
So agri-tech, I think it's very important. Food security is important. I don't think we are very efficient. So I like the story about Cameron Highlands. A lot of people used to buy vegetables from wholesalers, right?
Yeah.
And the supply chain looked very complicated. I like the one click and you get your things here.
Yeah, in one click you can do a lot of things. Speaking of one click, we are 10 seconds away from finishing this. So in one click, we're gonna finish this session. Allow me to thank you once again for this transformative, disruptive panel. Thank you very much, The Star. We'll see you all very soon, and don't forget to like this talk.